callous and emotionless wife doused her husband in petrol and then set him alight on the porch of their home in Victoria, Australia, while their young children sat and watched TV nearby. And just for context, no way in hell did she admit her guilt, even when she was sentenced to 12 years for ending her husband's life. Angela Surtees was described as the type of person whom had to get her own way. She was brash and in a rush. She was in charge and she let everyone know this. Her social media feeds were categorised as rant-filled and pedantic, used to cause controversy. Now, Angela and her husband Daniel had been married for 4 years. They had 2 young children together, and Daniel had 3 children previously. Angela and Daniel owned a photography business, but Daniel also worked as a chef in order to make sure bills were paid, the lights were kept on, and food was put on the table. Now, on January 25th, 2020, Angela and Daniel had attended Daniel's brother's engagement party, Lee. The couple started arguing, which was a regular occurrence, and it continued in the evening once the married couple arrived home at 7 p.m. Now, while the children went into the living room to watch TV, Daniel and Angela had a go at each other again. By 8:30 p.m. that night, the oldest child, who was 11 years old, called emergency services. Angela then got on the phone and told operators that Daniel had caught fire and needed some help. Angela was calm and cool and collective. She explained to the operator that some petrol had spilled on Daniel during an argument. The way Angela spoke, it was almost as if Daniel had small burns, insignificant. And Angela continued to tell the operator, "There was a big bottle of lawnmower petrol that spilled and ignited while he was lighting a smoke," she said. "He's got superficial peeling to his skin and secondary on his hands, but in the background, Daniel was screaming in absolute agony and pain." Now, when paramedics arrived on the scene, they knew it was much worse. It was a horror sight. Daniel had been engulfed in flames, he was set alight and he looked like a walking fireball. He had suffered burns to 80% of his body. Even his own children tried to douse him in water. Angela says that Daniel had poured petrol over himself because he was a pyromaniac. She also said that Daniel had poured petrol over himself and then begged her to set him alight. She told police she had flicked the lighter when he had lunged at her, and it was a stupid mistake. But when investigators checked the scorch marks on the house, specifically on the porch, they could tell that Daniel had been sitting down when doused in petrol. They also concluded that Angela had poured petrol over Daniel and it lasted for between 10 and 15 seconds. Angela was arrested and at first she was charged with murder, but while awaiting for trial, she was offered a deal by the prosecution which involved her pleading guilty to manslaughter. It basically meant she would be admitting that she caused Daniel's death, and as a result of an unlawful and dangerous act. But while in prison waiting for the case to be heard, Angela continued to shock as she wrote letters which the court would gain access to. Now, in these letters, she blamed everybody but herself. She blamed Lee for turning off the life support, and she blamed Daniel for doing it to himself. Effectively, she was the victim. Daniel did not recover, and his brother Lee had to make the decision to turn off life support. There was no way he could be saved. Something, as I said, which Angela blamed Lee over too, even though he's the one who took in all the children. Now, Angela was jailed for 12 years and told she must serve a minimum of 8 years before being considered for release. While the judge told her about her sentence, Angela continued to cry. She continued to wail and continued to blabber. But this was no crying for her husband. She didn't care about him. All she was crying was for herself. She was the victim. Stay safe, safe.